And welcome back to Small Biz Matters. You are here with Alexi Boyd from Boyd Office Management Services, proud supporters of Triple H. And we're here with Andy Farrell to talk in part 2 on our fabulous show all about your online presence and why it's so important with businesses. Welcome back to the show, Andy Farrell from Event City. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, Alexi. It's great to be here again.
Indeedy, indeedy. Now, a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about looking backwards to look forward for your business. And I was having a think about that through the week and how very, very important that is because, like all things in business, online presence evolves and where your clients are evolves and the very nature of the internet is evolving constantly as well. So you need to be across that.
Totally. And because the other weird thing is that as much as certain things have changed enormously, there's other stuff that's stayed surprisingly much the same as it was when it was first conceived.
Email.
So, yeah, email was definitely one of those things.
And he's just lost his headphones.
Lost my headphones. But the thing I was actually thinking of was search optimization, the way search engines work, and search marketing and all those things. Is quite fascinating how that all came about. And we do think of it as having changed enormously. And as we'll talk about a little later, the curious thing is actually understanding where it's come from can help us sift through all the myths about how to be a good marketer in search and what really matters.
Because it's debunking the myth, really, isn't it? Because I think the people who are social media strategists and people who are experts at online marketing, it's like they're seeing the matrix. Like seeing through those algorithms and being able to wade through all that is gobbledygook to most of us. But I guess you can learn from history and experience and what's happened in your business to know what to do moving forward.
I like the analogy. I think they would like us to think that we think they see the matrix. I think a lot of the time it's not as mysterious as
you're only saying that because you understand it
believe.
Inside out, back to front.
But I also think there's a lot of mystery that's overlaid on a lot of these things that's doesn't really have a really strong foundation.
So the word algorithms shouldn't scare us as business owners.
They exist, but they're not something that's very visible to anybody. These are secrets, the secret sauce of how Google works and how Facebook work. Sure, algorithms are involved, but I think the myths come about when self-appointed experts say that they understand those algorithms, when in fact the Facebooks and Googles of the world do a lot to make sure that those algorithms stay very, very opaque and no one can understand them, because if people really understood them, then they could be manipulated. And that's the whole point, is that they don't want you to manipulate those things.
And they are also constantly changing.
Yes.
Yeah. So I guess looking back to look forward in terms of your business is really important because it does help you to have a vague understanding. And although you can, employ other people to do all these sort of strategizing and marketing for you, you are the one that needs to be in control of it ultimately.
Very true. And I think, even though there's a lot to be said for getting help when you need help, if you don't understand, have even the vaguest notion of what it is that they are doing or what it is they claim to be doing, then you're leaving yourself wide open to be taken for a ride.
Indeed. So let's have a chat to let's have a chat to you. let's talk today about things when it comes to really just understanding and what should we be measuring, for example, like when we're looking at sort of customer stuff and what customers are doing. How do we even know that? How do we even find out those details?
That's a great question. And when you think about...
It's a very layman question, the way I just phrased it. But yes.
When you look in your email box, you'll often see offers from companies and you'll think, wow, how did they know to send me that offer? It seems or feels timely. And a good example is companies that sell travel. And quite often they will find themselves in the situation where they know they've got an empty plane coming up a week away. How do they fill it? And what they've achieved is the thing that we need to achieve here, and that is to understand our digital marketing channel well enough that we can actually predict what is the effort we need to invest to get an outcome that fills a particular business need we have. So in the case of those travel businesses, they knew that if they sent 32,000 emails out with a particular relevant offer, that they could expect 1.5% conversion predictably every time, because they measured everything, they knew who was interested in what, they knew which offers resonated with them, and they knew what time of day to send them the offer, what was the price point that would work at a particular time of year, and so on. So they've measured it all and turned the whole exercise into a science.
And so that's what we kind of need to try and do in a really small way
Yeah.
That's what we were talking about last week in terms of understanding your audience and knowing how to access those people as well, and that sort of thing. So what else should we be measuring?
So what we're really looking at doing is trying to create a predictable customer funnel. So we could break that down into about 5 steps that we can start to measure. So the first one, which we talked about a little bit before, is acquisition. That's where you put the bread on the water and try and get attention shifted to your website through a range of activities. So we want to track the sorts of things that are quite easy to track, the likes and the shares and so on. But mostly we're interested in what attention actually is shifted to our site. So that's actually the important metric, and we might call that the next step of the funnel, which is activation, where people actually get engaged with our business.
And that's what we were talking last week when we were mentioning those Google, what were they called again?
They were the short URLs. So
short
we're going
URLs.
to track our shares.
Yeah. So using those as much as possible. If you missed that out in the 2 weeks ago program, please check out our podcast, because we went in depth into what a shortened URL does and what advantage that gives you from making a connection between, say, a Facebook page and your website. And that's what people need to remember, don't they? When we're talking about measuring, ultimately, you need to push people to your website, because that's your heart and soul of the business online marketing. It's no good having these Facebook posts if they don't ultimately get people more interested in the information that you need to show them on the website.
Exactly.
They're the bread on the water.
Yeah, and that's the bit you control, whereas the social channels you don't control. You can't be sure what Facebook's going to do next week. And the thing people struggle with is engaging in a consistent way in that space that is in somebody else's hands who's trying to make money out of what you're doing. So you're right. That's why it's important that we do measure those acquisition channels, that we understand how they're working today, and we measure that. And we have a range of channels that we're using, and then we use that information to help us know how to better acquire customers next week.
And the activation is when they get engaged with your business.
So acquisition is the first step, and activation, you're right, is the second step. So they've probably got to your website. Hopefully you're trying to get them to do something meaningful, like pop an email address in to subscribe to a newsletter, or perhaps to get access to something valuable that you're going to let them download. Perhaps it's a PDF how-to guide or a special report, or it could even be a tool that lets them calculate something. So there's lots of nice little ways of incentivizing and engaging customers who are starting to get to know your business and providing them with more help in the way of valuable information, but just putting a small barrier in there so that we can know a little bit more about them. And collecting the email address is singularly the most important thing you can do, for the simple reason nothing, despite all the things that have changed, to this day works as well as email. And I know a lot of people kind of go, oh, you're kidding me. But the sad thing is, when you do look at the numbers, and as much as we think of email as a huge fire hose of spam a lot of the time, with good spam filtering, with services like Outlook and Yahoo and Gmail online nowadays, it's very easy to organize that fire hose of email nicely, and so it actually becomes more useful. And what everybody who uses email effectively sees is, in terms of conversion, that's the outward message channel that converts the best, that gets the most traction, that delivers relevant messages successfully. So that's why collecting email addresses will always, in the foreseeable future, remain, as surprisingly as that may sound, the most important thing you can do.
Well, surprising it may be, but if the statistics are pointing towards email being the most effective way of getting the attention of customers and getting in their face, then yeah, absolutely. I see what you mean. Because you can't, if people want to see your newsletter, no algorithm in the world is going to change that. The people will want to see it. So it's about making sure that they're engaged with that and activating. So you've got so you're actually giving them the bread, and they're taking the bread, and then they're giving you something back, which is their email address, so you can start to continue the conversation. So what's the next step in our 5-step process?
Well, you just said it, continue the conversation. So that's retention. That's when we get them back. And what that tells us is we've got some genuine interest here. They've actually come back a second time. They've responded to our newsletter. They've responded to a social media post or something that's brought them back a second time. And that extra tier of engagement is really beginning to tell us that we're sending out the right messages, we're delivering the right content, we're actually now beginning to retain attention. And so you're starting to build up some loyalty with that individual. Oh,
I like that idea of loyalty as well, because I'm a big fan of loyalty. sometimes go and get a coffee somewhere where it's not so great just because I like the people, for example. So the first thing you do is you talk about acquisition, putting bread on the water, the activation, which is where they get actually engaged with it. Retention, you succeed with bringing them back a second or a third time. Repeat customers, repeat advertising. And that's where, I guess, keeping your information that you're giving them relevant and important to them is very, very important, because they've got to want to come back.
Yep.
You can't just go, hey, come back to look at my website that hasn't changed one iota since you were there last time.
Exactly. And the curious thing is that that's actually, once you've achieved that retention, that's a good time to see whether you can't get them to refer what you're doing to somebody else, because they've already gained some confidence that you're sharing something of value.
Mm-hmm.
So now they're ripe to be asked to pass that along, to share a social post or to share or like your webpage. So that's the fourth step, is to try to get them to refer your business.
And that's what we talk a lot about on Small Biz Matters. We talk about positioning yourself as the expert.
Yep.
So you may not necessarily be this person that you're communicating with now, this person that you are retaining now is not necessarily your client. But if they have confidence in you and they believe you to be the expert in your field, and they hear of someone else that needs that service, guess who they're going to think of? The person who's top of mind, the person that they know is to be the expert in their field. And that's why, we can talk about much bigger things now, but that niching yourself in a certain area of business and all that sort of thing, so you're the only expert. But it is that retention. It's about bringing them back again and again and drip feeding them information that is useful to them and to other people that they know, to increase your awareness.
And this is a massive multiplier effect. I mean, you can't understate that. If you think, for example, you might have a few hundred followers on your Facebook page, and maybe you put a post up and 20 or 30 of them or even 100 of them see it, and 2 or 3 engage with it. But if 2 or 3 also share it, and they in turn have hundreds of followers on their page, you've just increased your reach enormously.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, I mean, if you've ever seen what happens when a post goes viral, that's precisely the driver. You'll see something starting to get a lot of likes, all of a sudden it's got 20, 30, 40 shares, and all of a sudden you have literally tens of thousands of people seeing that message.
And you have to learn from your own history. So going back to what we were saying originally about the history of the progression, you need to look back at what was successful previously in your blogs or your posts, or what's been shared or what people have talked about. And sometimes it's just the quirkiest stuff.
Yep.
Sometimes it can just be because it's topical and it's not going to work again because in the economy and the frame of mind that people were in at the time, it was relevant. But you need to pick those out and say, well, what worked and what didn't work, and in order and keeping on that message about retention and referral.
Yep.
And the last step 5, I like this word, revenue.
Oh, yeah, this is the biggie. This is when you actually get them to spend some money.
Yeah.
To use one of your services, buy one of your products. And then, of course, you then just put them back through that cycle again and repeat. Continue to acquire new customers, retain the ones you've got with more good content, more propositions to refer, more incentives to get deeper involved with whatever information you're
That's
providing.
where words like value added comes in beautifully right there at that 5th step, when you're starting to, you get them on the hook, you get them to use one of your products and then find out other products that they could possibly be interested in and refer to others. We're going to take a quick break here on Small Biz Matters, just listen to some sponsors' announcements. We will be right back with Andy Farrell. You are listening to Triple H 100.1 FM. And we're back in the room with Small Biz Matters on Triple H 100.1 FM. Thank you for joining us. We are here with Andy Farrell talking about online marketing and the importance of looking backwards to look forward. And also, just before the break, we were talking about the 5 steps of retaining, acquiring, and I'll just quickly go through those for those of you who missed it. Acquisition, acquiring customers, activating them, making sure that they are engaging with you and moving onto your website, which is your central golden point of advertising really online. Retention, making sure they give you some data that means that they'll keep coming back. Referral, them referring you onto other people because you've positioned yourself as the expert in the field. And of course, that final very important step, otherwise a whole other lot of the 4 steps become pointless, which is revenue. So let's say that I'm doing all that. Okay, great. But most people I talk to are still in the acquisition stage. They're still just popping things onto social media. They're not really making that next really important leap, which is they're posting good content, but they're not making that connection with the all-important website. So how do you get to that step of acquisition?
Well, I think there's two things we should talk about there, and one you actually just touched on a moment ago when you talked about experimenting. And while we're on the subject of looking back, so we can look forward. One of the things we can look back on is how have people previously built very successful examples of what it is we're trying to do. So there's a fantastic case study around ScienceAlert.com, who have an incredibly successful Facebook page with millions. That's right, millions of people following, and it's an Australian small business.
Oh, really?
And what they did is exactly what you touched on, is they experimented constantly with the kinds of content that they were sharing to figure out what works. Now, I've actually got a Facebook page around health and fitness. It was something I was interested in. I've stopped being interested in it now. I've gone back to just eating whatever, but no, seriously. But one of the things I did with that page was the same thing. I started experimenting on, would people like to read health and fitness posts? And if so, what would they like to read about? And I tried lots of things. I put sciencey stories about, they've just discovered that if you eat this, you won't get that, and that sort of stuff. And people weren't really that interested in that. Get the occasional like, not so much. And I tried motivational memes. People love that. They go nuts.
Really?
They share the heck out of them. Yeah.
Aren't people sick of that stuff yet?
It works. And this is the thing. You need to kind of figure that out. I tried health recipes. That was also very, very popular.
You would have tapped into the mum sphere there.
Must have,
Sorry,
yeah.
that was really sexist. I just patched myself on the back of the head. Go on.
I tried short video clips of people doing amazing things in workouts. Everyone loved that. Something diabolically difficult looking, which was kind of motivational. They loved it. Put a story up there about how they've discovered you won't get cancer if you eat X. Nobody seemed to care. so that's the weird thing, is stuff that you think, this looks important, maybe not. So you need to try a whole bunch of different things and figure out what's actually going to get
So you need
traction.
you need to sort of basically set aside some time, spend the time experimenting on your clients, on your potential clients.
Yeah.
But how do you build up that database in the first place to experiment on? That's what I really struggle with. It's okay, I can get half of my Facebook friends and just guilt them into liking my page so I've got some numbers.
Yeah.
How do you get the actual people who might actually end up being those revenue customers
So
in there?
There's two ways. There's the fast way, which will cost you a small amount of money. And I've done this with a few pages where when you first launch and you're trying to build up a little bit of critical mass, get a bit of a footprint in the Facebook space, buy visibility. So you actually buy Facebook ads to get your first few hundred followers.
Okay.
So the way you do that is you'll come up with a really great post. You'll test it on a few friends, fools, and family and see if they like it. If it does, then you can set up an ad on Facebook. It's actually very easy with Facebook ads to test different images and different headlines. So you can also create a few variations and figure out what works. Set yourself a small budget. It doesn't have to be ridiculous. It might only be $50.
Okay.
And you can narrow your target very, very closely to the people you really want to have as followers. So it might be a particular demographic. It might be people that behave in a particular way, that have certain common interests. It's quite nuanced the way you can target your ads. And then once you get that initial few hundred followers using that method, then it's just a case of putting out good content and just watching it slowly grow. So I've had another page grow from a few hundred to a couple of thousand, bought the first couple of hundred, got to 2,000 basically just over the space of a year and a half of posting great content and paying attention to what works.
Yeah. Oh, I really like that idea. I think that's what a lot of businesses struggle with, is so I know that I understand the concept of boosting. Don't quite know how it works, so that's an interesting concept. Is that I guess Facebook knows more about us than we know about ourselves. Let's all face that.
Yep.
And then of course, where do I put the money when when is the best time? And that is really realistic and really logical that you would do it right at the beginning to build up a small database on which you can grow. What an Excel person I am! I just said database when we're talking about Facebook. So tell me about who's Seth Godin? You were mentioning him in the break. I said Godin.
Yeah, Seth Godin is probably one of the...
Godin for those of you who are busy.
Or GODS if it comes to marketing. He is one of the globally acclaimed guides of digital marketing. And he's written some amazing books about some of the transformations that have happened socially due to the way digital has changed the way we do business. But one of the nice things that he actually brought out a book that is fundamentally about this one thing, and that is that you need to be remarkable in order to stand out from the crowd. You know, there's a lot of noise on Facebook and a lot of noise in all social channels, and that is the challenge of how to come up with a messaging tone or a subject that actually stands out, coming up with a style that sticks out. And as Seth came up with a wonderful, very colourful analogy, that you need to figure out what is your purple cow. And in understanding what's a purple cow...
How many of you just thought of Prince then?
Yeah, that's probably unfortunate
purple
timing.
rain, purple cow.
So you can imagine driving through Glenorrey or somewhere and you look out and see a bunch of cows. You're probably not going to tell anybody about it when you get back to Hornsby. But if you saw a purple cow, you probably would.
Or a blue cockatoo.
Back to your coffee shop on Monday morning,
Yes.
You're going to say, hey, I saw a purple cow. And that's what it's all about. It's about doing something that is worth remarking on, doing something remarkable that people will talk about. And that's the crucial thing. You need to kind of figure out, in my business, what part of my story about how we do things, or about what it is that we're providing, what product we're selling, what service, how we deliver, what support we provide, whatever it is, you need to work out what it is about your business that is remarkable, that is different.
And you can do that with face-to-face marketing as well. So if you go to a networking group and you go to somewhere like Connect for Success, or you go to Hornsby Chamber of Commerce and there's 50 people in the room, why don't you experiment on those people? You go bookkeeping, 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 and then you go radio show and they all wake up.
Yeah.
I do it too. Nobody's interested in a bookkeeper or someone who does admin. That's the most boring job in the world, unless, of course, you're into admin like me. But if you say you've got to do something quirky, something different, what is it that actually makes you memorable in the real world, and then maybe transpose that into some online marketing tips? Well, make yourself remarkable. Make yourself the purple cow. I'm going to wear purple tonight.
Yeah, you're a living, walking example of how you can actually implement that strategy. Perfect.
Be quirky, everyone. Nobody likes boring, really. So purple cow. So the purple cow works on two levels. It applies to my business and also a message about whatever channel I'm sending out. So it's like the purple cow is almost your niche, but also your interesting bit of your business. What is it that makes you interesting to either a listener or people that you're chatting to one-on-one? Or why would people want to meet with you? Are you an interesting person? Are you dead boring? Is what you're doing boring? But nobody is in small business if they're not passionate. That's for sure. So you put a hook in your story and, tell me about this. Oh, you were just mentioning here in the notes here that there's a wonderful photo of a full peak hour train from 50 years ago where everyone's got a newspaper.
I think that's actually quite a famous photo. It's a very full carriage. It's the morning peak hour rush. And there everybody is seated with their broadsheet newspaper, delicately balanced on their knee so as to not intrude too much on the person next to them, but the entire carriage is doing it. And the funny thing is that today you'll hear people lamenting, oh, you get on a train and everyone's got their head buried in their mobile. Well, really, it hasn't changed that much, just the device is now the focal point instead of the paper.
Now we're just ruining our necks and our eyes.
Well, perhaps. But the key thing here is people spend so much time on their mobile these days. And yet so many businesses still do not understand that is now, in many cases, more than 50% of the attention that you garner is actually going to be on a mobile device or on a tablet, but probably on a mobile device. And, we just mentioned about email being the singularly most important facet of your digital strategy. Are you delivering emails that are eminently readable on a mobile device? And so often the answer is no. You get an email and you'll look at it and go, oh, it's
teeny.
Zoom in, it's all 3-point myopia and it's impossible to read.
Yes.
So actually that was probably going to be one of my other huge points here, is that you cannot think of mobile as a nice to have a bolt on, we'll get to mobile down the track, we'll do an app or something. But no, mobile has to be, in fact, the way it's been positioned in many businesses, they talk about mobile first. So what happens is everything is fundamentally designed so that it's a good mobile experience and a good web experience, not the other way around. So everything you do needs to consider mobile first. It is now becoming the primary channel through which people are consuming information about your business.
And that's what responsiveness means?
Yeah, so one of the answers to that problem is to build in such a way that the design responds to the device that it's being looked at on. So we have one design, one web page, one email, and then it figures out, when you look at it, am I on a tablet, am I on a desktop, am I on a mobile, and some elements in that page might disappear, or their size or position might change, and so it responds literally to the shape of the device, and that way it's a great experience for whatever device people are looking at it on.
Right, so that's obviously very, very important. We're just going to take a quick break, listen to some of our lovely sponsors here on Triple H 100.1 FM. We'll be right back with you with Small Biz Matters. And you are listening to Triple H 100.1 FM and Small Biz Matters, the half-hour program where you work on your business rather than in it. We are in the studio today with Andy Farrell from Event City talking about online marketing. And just before the break, we were talking a little bit about the importance of responsiveness when it comes to both your website and emails. And I hadn't thought of that before, to be honest. I'm sure there's plenty of times when people have sent out newsletters, not even bothered looking at them on a various tablet, app, phone. Oh, sorry, not app, but a tablet or a phone, and just checking. Can it actually be read at the other end? Not much point in sending something out if it can't be read. Now, talk to me about apps. Do we need an app? Do I need to throw money at a wall and have an app? What are they going to do with bookkeeping app?
This is a good question because, apps used to be ridiculously expensive to make. And what's happened, like so many things, there's now nice round-cornered wizard-style tools that let you make your own app. So, a lot of people come up to me and say, hey, I think I'm going to have an app. Well, the first problem...
I've got this great idea for an app, which has apparently been done 100 times before.
Well, I mean, for a lot of businesses, the first problem they'll have is that most of what they have to say in their app is nothing more than marketing. So you're going to be at odds with the iStores, with Apple's terms and conditions. They basically don't allow that style of app.
Oh.
So that's the first problem. App has to actually do something functional if it's going to make it onto the App Store.
Okay.
But the second thing, quite apart from the fact that it's also a little bit onerous, the whole process of getting apps onto the App Store and updating them and all that stuff, it can start to become quite a big distraction and a big expense. Going back to what we were just talking about with responsiveness, what is actually quite amazing is how far you can take this idea. So we were just talking about emails and websites and just general stuff, but applying those principles, you can actually create what we would think of as native app-like experiences in what is actually just a web page. And a great example of this is a startup I'm involved with called pizza.com.au. So we're creating a platform for independent pizza shops. And it's the Uber of pizza. Kind of, yeah. So what we've done is created an app which is actually available as a native app. But in fact, that native app you can also just use from a web page on your mobile phone. And if anybody wants to kind of see what's possible with the responsive, check out pizza.com.au and have a look at the interface. And, to all intents and purposes, it feels like you're using a native app, pretty much. So you can create a pretty amazing experience. Now, one of the reasons this is becoming more important is, I don't know about you, but a lot of people I talk to say, you know what, my phone's kind of full. It's becoming a bit of a challenge now. Every time someone says install...
Especially when you have children.
Yeah, install this app. It's like, well, I don't have so much room, and plus there's already a gazillion icons on there anyway. I can't even find them. So there is a bit of resistance now to just installing more apps all the time to solve every problem. So is there a better way? Well, Google's trying to solve the problem, and they've come up with something called progressive apps. And this is an idea which is kind of taking this responsive concept to the next level. It's basically saying if somebody goes to a web page, which gives you a great experience on a mobile device, and they visit that more than once, showing that they're actually genuinely interested in this, it's not a one-off visit, we will allow certain capabilities to be exposed that are actually the kinds of things you'd expect from a native app. So what happens is part of that website actually gets permanently stored on your phone. But this all happens without you doing anything. It's just a tiny little piece of that website that's left behind. Now, the reason that's good is next time you come back, it's going to be faster to use. But more importantly, that little bit of the website that gets left behind can actually talk to that business, and the business can use that to send you notifications of the same kind that you'd expect typically from a native app. So you know how you install an app and it might start putting little alerts and things.
Do you want push notifications?
In your stream? I mean, you can control all of this, of course, so it's not a surreptitious thing. So the exciting thing is you can now do that if you have an Android phone and you're running a recent version of Chrome and you visit a site that is doing this, providing a progressive mobile experience, you can start to have a native app-like experience with alerts, and there's a whole stack of other stuff too, without installing an app, which is kind of cool. It's a much less hassle. Some of the other things it can do is they can allow more information to be stored on the device to the point that that little remnant of the web page that's been left behind can give you some kind of meaningful experience even if you're not connected. So when you're offline, you might still be able to access some aspects of that site and some of the functions.
For example, a menu.
Exactly.
Ah.
Yeah, so we're going to potentially move into a space where the native app-like experience starts to become more synonymous with well-built web pages that are really mobile-friendly and have a lot of the functionality that we've thought is only available with a native app. So the line's going to get very blurry.
And it comes back to what you were saying about, okay, we're looking at the 5 steps again. We've got the acquisition, you've got people coming to your website, and then you've got the people wanting to then communicate with you, and then, where's my 5 steps? I've lost my 5 steps. Which page is it on? Wait, there it is. Okay, so your acquisition,
Yep.
people are talking about it, they're activating, they're engaging with your website. You're then, I won't say surreptitiously because it is, well, it's not surreptitious, is it? Because you've actively gone out and searched for these websites. You want the information, and I guess it goes on, that information goes on your phone. And I kind of like that idea that, say, for example, my credit card details that are related to that site are living on my phone. They're not living with the website, for instance. So is that the sort of thing that you mean when stuff that lives on your phone?
Probably not the actual credit card details. It might be a token that website can give to the bank to say, can we please do a transaction on your behalf, if you give permission for that to happen, of course. And you're right, there's obviously a fine line here where we don't want to do anything surreptitious, which is part of the reason why Google's built in some rules in the technology in terms of how this works and when they're allowed to start doing it. So it's got to be after a couple of visits, first of all. And certain things will still require you to give permission to the website before it can start doing things. But yeah, looking at those steps, this is part of that retention and activation cycle, getting people engaged, getting their permission to start giving them notifications and reminders about stuff that's going on. So, for example, with the small Biz Matters website, it could be, do you want to start giving someone a notification for an event that's on that they're interested in? Or next time you post a new blog, do they want to get an alert saying, hey, there's a new blog post?
Or saying, 5 minutes before the show, listen to Small Biz Matters now because you have to, because it's really important, it's going to be really great.
That's a great idea.
For example. Just get in everybody's face all the time. But that is actually, I just made a good point, getting in people's face. I mean, it's just that competition for being relevant and also for being top of mind for businesses as well. It is a competition. There is only so many hours in the day. There's only so much time people are willing to spend thinking about what they want to do to get to their accountant or to get to a lawyer or to get to whatever your business is. So yeah, you have to push and fight for those few milliseconds of thought space.
Yeah, and the neat thing here is we're building up something which is a channel we truly control and we truly own, as opposed to, as we've discussed, the difficulties and challenges with the Facebooks of the world, who ultimately their business model is to charge us to talk to the same customers that we actually went to the trouble of getting for them. So yeah, you're much better off to leverage those channels, but invest heavily in one of your own.
Yeah, we might pop up on the Small Biz Matters Facebook page some links to some information about progressive apps, so you can read up a little bit more about it, because it does sound quite interesting. I like the idea of an app being embedded in a website so that did you say progressive or embedded apps?
It's progressive. Yeah.
Progressive app.
Yeah.
And that there is a communication between your device that you're talking to websites with, which is either your mobile or your iPad, and that actual website, because it becomes more organic. It's actually what you've gone out to seek. It's not things just being pushed at you. You've gone to look for that website, and once it's become relevant to you, then it has a bit more of uses your mobile phone as a communication tool. Yeah. And you can always turn it off. It's not like we're invading people's space. You can always turn it off. So, talk to me about search results. So, design for mobile first, yes. Make sure that everything's responsive. Make sure you test things before you send them out. But what do we do about searching? Because that really is so important, isn't it? Just being in that top of the search results, particularly if you're someone who doesn't necessarily niche in what you do. Again, think about what we were talking about before, making sure that you find something that makes you unique and memorable and standing out from the crowd. What is your purple cow? Now that you've got that, how do you get that purple cow into the top 10 results for Google?
That's a great question. And again, this is an area that's quite fascinating to understand the history of, which will then tell us a lot about what it is we should be worrying about today. So quite often, I think most small businesses are probably deluged with emails saying, hey, pay us $250 and we'll get you to the number one or, in the top 10
Does it ever work?
Search results. And yeah, I mean, the problem is that the reality, the truth of the matter is nobody can possibly guarantee a position on a Google search result. So if you're seeing that kind of proposition and they're making those kinds of promises, you probably should go somewhere else. And to understand a bit about this, there's actually today hundreds of factors that Google takes into account in deciding whose website is going to show up when somebody does a search. And this has come about because early in the piece, when there were way less things that Google considered, people tried to game the search engine and tried to manipulate it.
AdWords.
And they succeeded. Now, this is not to do with AdWords. So I'm just talking about organic search. In other words, the natural search results that come up when you just do a search on Google, not the paid ads. So nothing to do with AdWords. People tried to manipulate that. And they were successful at manipulating it, and that's why Google has added so many other factors to try to add more nuance. But in so doing, they have complicated understanding how it is that Google ranks pages to the point that it's, contrary to what you often read, very, very difficult to say that this factor singularly or that factor singularly is a major contributor. So what do we have to go by? Now, luckily, Google has actually published a guideline to this. It's called the Search Engine Optimization Guide. So if you go and Google that, the Search Engine Optimization Starter Guide actually is the full name.
Let's pop that on the Small Biz Matters Facebook page.
Go and Google that. It's a really great PDF you can download off Google that gives you some beautiful step-by-step, total no-brainer things you can do to actually improve your search. I'll give you an example of one of them. So you probably notice when you do a search, you'll get a title and then a short description of each of the websites that fit your search. That title is actually the title that shows up on the page when you view it in your browser. And you'll see that title typically now on most browsers, it'll be in the actual tab of the browser window you've got open.
Okay.
So a lot of websites make the mistake of not having unique titles on each page. They'll call it something meaningless like home or about, which isn't really very helpful. So those titles should actually talk about the website, talk about the content specifically on that page. They should be unique. So every page should have its own distinct title, and they should be relevant to not just the content, but also to, and this is where it starts getting interesting, to the kinds of searches that we're hoping people are going to run in order to find us.
Right.
So getting back to your question, how do we know what people are looking for? How do we figure that out? And I know last week, a week before last, we touched on this briefly. There's actually a few ways to figure that out, and this is a really interesting exercise because it can put shape around your entire digital strategy to know how do customers see my business in terms of what words do they use when they think about the products and services that I'm selling. And this is a great challenge for a lot of companies and a lot of people working in their business because they have trouble seeing the world they're in from the outside again. They're inside, they've got that kind of myopic vision, and they start using gobbledygook to describe everything
they are the
do.
experts. Exactly. Yeah. They're talking at the expert level, not at the consumer level.
So this will flip that around totally. So the first thing you can do is go to google.com/insights, and you can guess. You can start off guessing, what do you think the phrases are people are searching for? And you can put that into Google Insights and see. You can compare multiple phrases, and Google will also suggest other words that people used that are similar to the words you're suggesting. And using that process, you can start to see the relative difference between different phrases in terms of the volume of search that's occurring. So this won't give you actual hard numbers. It'll give you relative difference. So it's kind of like a line chart, and you can kind of see, well,
Helps you choose between one or the other.
That's really important. That one doesn't even rank. Sometimes you'll put a phrase in and it'll say, you know what, there's not even enough data to tell you.
You got nothing.
Yeah. And that's particularly troublesome, for example, with locally targeted phrases. So what else can we do? Well, another neat trick is actually to go into Google's pay-per-click campaign manager. So you basically go in as if you're going to set up a pay-per-click ad. So they're those ads that run, they used to be on the side, but now they're actually at the top in the middle. And you'll go in there and you'll need to set up an ad, and then you can go in and put keywords that you're going to target. And here's where it gets really interesting. So Google gets really helpful because you're spending money, and they start telling you not only other keywords that you want to think about using, it'll tell you the exact number of searches that it predicts will happen around that phrase.
Oh, so you do a dummy as if you're going to set this up, and then you don't really.
You just use the information.
Yeah.
So now we're getting some really hard numbers on what's the size of our market in the search place. How many people are actually looking for our product or service? And quite often you begin to uncover something really interesting, and that is that the phrase that you might think is the most obvious choice is eclipsed by the other 100 variations of that phrase, which are what we talk about as the long tail, because each of them individually may only have 3 or 4 searches, but as a group they might represent 400 or 500 searches, whereas the biggest, most common phrase might only be 100 searches.
Yes.
So this is where our content strategy and our whole digital strategy can now be shaped by saying, well, we need to have some diversity in the content, some diversity in the kinds of social posts we're making to speak to a number of, or as many of those as we can muster of those long tail search results, and begin to have that, we talk about content marketing. That's what it's trying to do. It's trying to talk mostly to that long tail, because typically those obvious phrases are highly competitive. It's really hard to get visibility around those in search. So if you are selling insurance and you just do Insurance Australia or house insurance, you'll find
forget it.
You've got almost no chance.
It's like AdWords on steroids, isn't it? You're tailoring that sentence structure to make sure you're there. Look, Andy, we've run out of time. That was awesome sauce. We've covered a hell of a lot of stuff about social media and advertising online and breaking. Well, I won't say we'll break the Google algorithm, but we've uncovered some of its secrets. Tweaked it. Thank you so much for joining us today and a couple of weeks ago. Of course, if you'd like to listen to the podcast, they will be available in the next day or so on the Small Biz Matters website. That's smallbizmatters.com.au. And of course, Andy is from Event City, so check out their website too, eventcity.com. That's Event City with an S. And if you've got any questions about today's show, you can, of course, get in touch with us via the Small Biz Matters Facebook page, which we've just talked about lots. Facebook. So thanks for joining us today, Andy.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll have you on the show in the next next few weeks, and we'll talk again about all things online /marketing /history all the stuff many things about. Thanks for joining us on Small Biz Matters. You're here on Triple H 100.1 FM. We will see you next week, Tuesday, 9 a.m. Small Biz Matters, the half-hour program where you work on your business rather than in it.